Does anyone have anything else to add to it?
Anything to add to the agenda?
No.
Nothing here.
Okay. So I want to spend most of our time, hopefully, on sprint planning, but let's start with the, I'm saving that for last because I'm assuming there'll be some more discussion there. Collaborator proposals. We have one from US Ignite and Viavi. I don't know for sure how to pronounce that.
I think Viavi, yeah.
Viavi.
Viavi. So I know we talked about last time having presentations, and I think in general, if we don't know someone, that's a great thing to do to learn about them. I think we could also have, if there are people who understand what these folks are up to and can advocate for them and explain and help shepherd and so on, that might be sufficient. Otherwise, these could take a long time getting scheduled and executed.
I agree. I mean, I think my preference would be to get them in quickly and then schedule some sort of, maybe there's a welcome presentation they can be encouraged to give to the CORD to this meeting going forward. But I don't want to lose people's enthusiasm by making them wait a couple weeks before we can schedule them in and delaying the onboarding.
Well, I'm okay with that. I want to avoid a situation where we have people plastering their name on our website for the marketing value of it. I want to have a little. I agree that the hurdle shouldn't be really high. We let them prove themselves, but I would like to make sure that we have real interest.
Of course. And to your point about them, concern about just plastering the logos, I think we should be pretty aggressive at delisting people if they're not doing what they said they were going to do.
Good. So in the case of Viavi, like I said, I spent time with them. The history is they come out of the LMAP effort, which in a curious kind of way wraps all the way back around to Planet Lab because it came out of broadband evaluation that the FCC did a few years ago, and they created a monitoring, I don't want to call it a standard, but they spent some time thinking about how to actively monitor. That is, not just passively watch data go by, but actively monitor networks. It started out as a way to actively monitor broadband connections, but it looks like they have taken it into active monitoring as a general tool in different systems. And so they have proposed a monitoring service. I kind of think of it as like what Shrikant is building, but maybe slightly different focused. And one day down the line, it may merge in and it become one giant monitoring service, or maybe we'll have a whole suite of independent monitoring services. Either way is fine. And so I'm fine with these guys. It's a legitimate project, and it looks like they're committed to putting resources into it. So, having chaired numerous committees and organizations like this, I recognize that sometimes the best way to make decisions is if there's an advocate for it and no one is objecting, to go ahead and declare the decision and move on. So I would like to just declare this, that we admit Viavi and move on to the next one unless there are objections, but please do speak up if you have objections.
No objections here.
Okay. US Ignite, actually Andy has been working with them, and if he wants to speak up I know he's driving and so it may not be easy for him, but Andy, do you want to chime in on US Ignite?
Sure. Well, I have connectivity. I can try to say something. So I've been working with US Ignite, particularly Rick McGeer, in the context of a number of projects over the course of the last 10 years. I think Rick's main skill, what he brings, is the ability to see opportunities and get people excited about those opportunities and moving in that direction. And he's really excited about CORD, particularly the industry support that we have, and really looking for bringing CORD to projects that the NSF might be doing or DARPA might be doing, um, and try to get them interested in the CORD platform for building out systems that they might be interested in.
So let me add, for those that don't know US Ignite, this was an initiative announced by the White House a couple of years ago. And the NSF has put some pretty reasonably serious funding into it. And they're trying, amongst other things, to connect cities. And so on the one hand, they're working collaboratively when they can with carriers. On the other hand, they're trying to move it, jump past what carriers are doing with community-based efforts. And so they basically put in what I would call a CORD cluster into different locations and try to load them up with services. So it's very much in line. It kind of takes us in a potential for government funding direction. And if they ever are successful in looping back and making something work in collaboration with AT&T or Google, it would be a really good deal. We're not necessarily going to get engineering out of it. It's possible if they'll get a proposal funded that could happen. I'm pretty sure they have significant funding for buying clusters. And so bringing them on board, if we could figure out a right way to pilot a couple cities. And oh, by the way, they do smart cities, but they also prototype on smart campuses. And so getting them to pay for some clusters and make them CORD clusters could be a win for us in a couple settings. So I kind of view them as a little bit like when we have Internet 2 as a partner, and by the way, Internet 2 is likely to come back and say we want to be a collaborator. This is that. Anyone with questions or concerns?
No, sounds good to me.
All right, thanks.
Larry, one process question.
Yep.
Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
So just going forward, it sounds like the template we want to use is I get a proposal, I send it to the CORD list, and we don't finalize until this meeting.
Yep. But they should be weekly so that it shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, agreed.
And we'll try to deal with these as, early in the agenda and get them out of the way.
I do have one agenda item that I might want to add.
What's that?
So I've been talking to a few partners, who are putting up rack space for us.
Oh yeah.
And I'm gonna have a chat with Guy Calix, I think this afternoon or maybe tomorrow. And one of the items we're gonna talk about is kind of like either some kind of contract, not really a contract, but like some kind of like memorandum of understanding. I don't know how to call it, whatever it's called, the piece of paper where we say we agree on things. And I was wondering if people here had items that should go into that document, something to go in there in particular, other than the usual, the kind of like generic, we'll have equipment in your lab, we'll have access to it, and that kind of nailing down the access policy, whether it's remote or physical access. But is there any other things that people think should be in that kind of document?
That would be a great one to get spelled out just generically. So that's a great item, and other people that want to help us out with test equipment we'd have a recipe for it.
Okay.
So we have a number of MOUs. This is an interesting question, and I don't know that this is a technical steering team or exactly where. By and large, Guru has negotiated with MEF and BBF and so on. I don't know how we deal with those broadly.
So I guess in this particular case, what I would say is that if you guys can say technically, from your point of view, here is what you want in that MOU, then what either that particular organization or our legal counsel can put some kind of a structure around those things and keep it very simple and get it signed. So, but what you want or what you have agreed with that organization, you should be able to write it in whatever simple points.
Yeah.
And then we can turn it into a simple
Yeah.
agreement.
So what's happening now is that like I've asked him for the first draft of this paper.
Mm-hmm.
So he took it to their legal counsel,
Oh.
and then they're gonna put it together. And I said, okay, that's fine. Send it to us, and then we'll go through that and say whether we're okay with it, add whatever, remove whatever we want to agree with. That's kind of the approach. Is that the wrong way around?
I mean, I think I'm assuming that majority of these are companies are dealing with is much bigger, right? So they have a tendency, if first you go to their legal department, they will have a tendency to make it much more elaborate and so on. So what I prefer is that the technical people agreeing, and then our legal counsel creating a simplistic legal agreement. So that would have been better, but if you are starting anything new, maybe you can follow that. In this particular case, if one company is already down that path, that's okay. We will see what they come back with.
Yeah, I think it's rather. I mean, he claimed it was rather simple.
Okay.
He had to send it to his.
I hope. Yeah.
legal team. We'll see what ends up coming out of it. Hopefully, it's not 25 pages.
So Ali, this was Calyx, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, a broader solicitation on the mailing list or Slack, just soliciting ideas on what people would like to see in test infrastructure. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, there's another item behind that is we'll have in total in the fullness of time about 8 racks worth of equipment, well 8 racks worth of space. Some of these racks will be equipped, others won't. And the question is really how do we divide these racks up into what kind of function do these racks get? Like some of them will be development pods, others will be testing pods, others will be continuous hours of operation type things. So we kind of have to decide, maybe not in this TST, but in an upcoming TST, we should probably discuss what they're used for so that everybody knows what they're there for.
Great. Well, so I would declare you the committee of one to pull that stuff together.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah, recruit whoever you want.
Can I delegate?
And delegate. Absolutely. I mean, that's how these things are going to work. We're just going to get someone that has an interest in something, and they push it forward. We all kind of comment on it. Perfect.
Is this mute or no?
No, it's mute. That's right.
Okay. Projects. So this is the issue of what we're going to list as official projects, and we talked about this a fair amount last time, and we had Trellis and XOS. I'm totally spaced out on it, but I added a third grandfather, which we can talk about as well, which was OpenCloud, which is a deployment of CORD in the R&E community. So we can come back and visit that one. In terms of Trellis and XOS, I asked a question about Trellis, and I felt, although I was kind of sitting on the fence, I realized that I was a little bit ambiguous just because I wanted some, consensus that the TST still had its fingers into the platform broadly defined, and we wouldn't find ourselves with Trellis as an outside project that we just were having a difficult time influencing, or was once removed from what we had direct influence over, and that sounds like that's not the case. It's certainly not the case for XOS. So I'd like to reopen that discussion, but generally I'm okay with listing those two as separate projects. Does anyone else cleared up their thinking at all?
I mean, are there conditions attached to being listed as a project? Like, and I'm just saying this. Like, does this mean that like your code is under the open CORD organization, or can the code be anywhere?
I would like to see it under the organization. I mean, sorry, I would like to see it under the open CORD repository.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that if we're going to go down that route of listing Trellis and XOS, well, I guess XOS is already under the open CORD repo, but for Trellis, it means that like we'd have to delay it for at least until the next release, where Saurav and I have talked about getting segment routing into into the open core repo. So so we'd have to wait until that happens before listing it as a project if this is what we're agreeing.
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as it was understood, I would be okay. That's where we were headed. I wouldn't make it a strict precondition. I mean, in this case, there's some history here. If anyone came up today and asked for it, then that might be different. But
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, my concern was basically, I mean, we're not going to bring obviously ONOS under the CORD umbrella, or OpenStack. That's silly. I just didn't want to see an increased migration of stuff that we considered core migrating out or not being consolidated or whatever the right word is.
Yeah.
So, Rob, what are your thoughts?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh. No, I just think there should be one rule and it should apply to everybody equally. I understand that there's precedence or there's history here, but I think there should be one rule that applies to everybody equally, because if we list something as a project and it doesn't follow the rules that we set down of that project, then other people will say, well, why not mine? Right?
Well, so I sort of draw a distinction between projects. This one's tricky. Projects that are, I think the technical term in the project life cycle is core, versus those that are not. So let me just use a counterexample, which is OpenCloud, just for the sake of argument. I don't consider OpenCloud core to CORD. I considered a user of CORD. And so as you know, there is already an OpenCloud repository, GitHub, and I see it as cloning what's in the CORD repository and then maybe augmenting it in whatever way was necessary to actually run it on the OpenCloud hardware. So it would be a specialized version, possibly. And of course, feeding back to CORD if there was anything in the CORD that needed to change. So would you, by that definition, CORD in some sense lives outside of, I'm sorry, OpenCloud lives outside of CORD. So would you therefore declare it not a project?
Yeah, I would not.
I mean, it can be a project, but I thought, should it be, it's like a use case type of a project rather than a trellis, which is a core component of CORD. And that is my quick reaction.
Yeah, that's the distinction I would make, and I think the life cycle allowed for us to declare stuff that was core. I completely agree that if it's a project and it's core, it ought to be in the CORD repository. So I guess we don't agree on what projects are about.
What?
You said we don't disagree. I haven't seen any, I haven't heard.
We don't agree or we don't disagree?
I don't think we agree as to what projects, their purpose.
I'm not seeing any disagreement, or am I not reading it right?
Well, I would allow OpenCloud to be a project, but it would be labeled as not core. I forget what the word was. And I would list Trellis and CORD as projects, but I would list both of them as core.
So to me, OpenCloud is a use case, but not a core. So that is anybody? I didn't hear any disagreement about that.
Well, maybe I misheard Ali. I think Ali said he didn't think OpenCloud should be a project.
Well, maybe we need to distinguish core projects and use cases. Right?
I need to pull up.
Maybe there's a discriminant there.
So the way projects are defined, they talk about having a community around them. They talk about doing their own releases. So from that perspective, OpenCloud is definitely a project, right? And it's mature. It's not core because it doesn't get distributed with CORD, but it is very related to CORD, right? It uses CORD.
So thinking of these as quote unquote use cases, I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'm looking for the words on that so that I can.
But would that mean, by that definition, would that mean that Trellis makes its own releases?
It could.
And XOS as well?
I don't know.
Nick's very,
Well, no, I'm sorry, it's part of the core.
I'm confused.
Yeah, XOS is part of the core.
Yeah, but does that mean, like, if it's a project, you say it can make its own releases, or does it?
No, that's only if it's not core.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to talk about projects sometimes because we're not a mature enough project to understand the need for having projects.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry, I'm digging for the page. Project lifecycle, finally. Okay, so there is no, we could add a discriminator for use case and just clearly call that out. And maybe there's something that's neither core nor use case that we just haven't thought of yet. Well, so mature seems like there's multiple dimensions here. You go from incubation, proposal to incubation to mature. And then there's a whole other dimension, which is core, not core. Is that your reading, Bill?
So again, core means not core code, right? Core to distribution, right? It's a distribution
right.
concept, right? So either it's distributed as part of the CORD project and it's core, or it's not, right? Now, something can be not distributed with the CORD project, but can be quite mature, like ON.Lab, if you wanted to have that there. Or if the fabric becomes very general purpose across, and it's used by a whole bunch of projects out there in the real world, but it is under the umbrella of CORD, it can be there as a mature project. Or it could move into core.
So, but you see mature and core as mutually exclusive. I was sort of thinking these as two dimensions. You've got the core non-core dimension, and you've got the maturity dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that the TST could work with, or is this governance, are we stuck with it from a governance point of view?
So let me step you back for a minute. So imagine that you have 10 groups coming at you, each one with their own projects that are around CORD, and they're all wanting to be a part of it, and some of them want to make progress in the community and want to be associated with it. This is a way to help get those projects into a life cycle so that they can, they can be shown as something that, okay, that's part of CORD, but it's very, it's not mature yet. It's just a trial thing. So, okay, great, go off, go figure it out. Maybe after a year, they've got this great community. You really want to pull it into the core of what you're doing. Okay, maybe you're not quite ready. You could make it mature. Again, I think that one of the reasons we struggle with this is that we just aren't there yet, right? When we have such a, like Linux, right? When they have such a vibrant community, so many people wanting to do all kinds of things around their project, there has to be some way to classify those different projects.
So, Bill, I completely am on board with that. The problem I'm having is that core. It looks to me like it reads right now as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stages in the life cycle: proposal, incubation, mature, core, archived, and that you pass through that. You can die at any point, obviously, but that says that you only get to core. I just see it as a two-dimensional space instead of migrating through this. one dimension is whether you're core or not. You could, and the other dimension is whether you are your maturity.
Sure.
And the definition of core again is not kernel. Technically, it's more included in the distribution. So my question is, can we flesh out these states, or is this locked in by governance?
I don't think it's locked. I don't know what you mean by locked in by governance.
I just wondered if this was considered part of governance, or if this was something that was pliable by the TST if we wanted to.
It's not part of the governance, other than governance talks about projects and.
Okay, so project life cycle is under our purview potentially then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now popping back up. Ali, would you be comfortable with the definition of core is it's included in our distribution, and by implication, we consider it part of core, a core part of CORD. We can call out use cases as an alternative to core and treat maturity and incubation as part of the life cycle. Trellis and XOS are part of the core. I would argue they're mature as well. And Open Cloud is, and by the way, eCord and all the other REM ACORD I would consider part of the core as well. But something like Open Cloud, which is a user of, would be considered a use case, not core.
Yeah, that sounds okay to me.
Okay. And is it okay then at the same time if I go ahead and spell out, I'll call it use cases, I don't have a better, the implication here is that you're a user of, you're downloading CORD and then deploying it, but you want to do that in a way that is recognized as a project because there'll be a community around it. That sound okay to everyone?
Yep.
All right, I will add that and doctor up the life cycle to make that clear. With that definition, are we then okay with Open Cloud, Trellis, and XOS? Trellis and XOS will be core. Open Cloud will be this use case category. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, good. Let me get back to my notes. Okay, service inventory. Nokia has been building out the CORD service infrastructure around the metro network / carrier Ethernet that's coming out of eCord, and they've asked for a repository in Garrett, or a project. Again, not the use of the word project. I would like, this particular one isn't a big deal because it's clearly part of eCord, but I just wanted to make it an official decision because I would like to have the TST gate the creation of new repositories. And just make sure that people understand what that means. Does anyone have issues or requirements or thoughts about how we would do that generally? I've been pushing back just to figure out if I wanted to make sure that from an eCord point of view, they didn't show up and ask for 6 different repositories because they had 6 parallel activities going on that they had not yet taken the time to reconcile. And not 6 is obviously too big a number, but you get the idea. But other than that pushback, this one seems pretty obvious.
I'm sorry, I didn't exactly understand what the repository is going to contain.
It's going to contain the Metro Network service.
And what is that service?
All services are whatever is the implementation of that service, the image to be booted, the ONOS program that is to run there, and the XOS controller plugins necessary to onboard it into CORD.
No, but what does the service provide? I mean,
Oh, this is
what does it do?
This is the eCord's on-demand metro area Ethernet L2 network.
Why have we never heard about this before?
We have. This is what eCord's been building.
What's it got to do with Nokia?
Nokia.
eCord's been building what Mark has been doing, right?
No, this is Nokia taking the next step to get the repo to put all the stuff in. They, in particular, have been building out the XOS pieces.
What's it got to do with what Mark has done?
Well, Mark is just overseeing the whole thing. There are at least two sub pieces to this. There's actually more, but there is how to integrate it into CORD, which is Nokia's been working on, and then there's the ONOS app, which my understanding is what Huawei's been working on. And I'm sorry, Mark is general contractor overwatching the whole thing.
I've seen Mark's demo, and I guess I haven't seen any parts of the things that you are describing. And this is as recently as 3 months ago, right? Where at ONS he did his demo. Yeah, I don't remember seeing any Nokia. I don't remember seeing any Huawei.
Well, so Nokia's involvement is fairly recent. It's been since then. So maybe there's parts of this I don't understand, which I was hoping Mark would be here today, so he could explain it all. Is there anyone else from eCord there?
No.
Then why take a decision on anything right now on this?
We don't have to, except Nokia would like to start building this out, and they need a repo for that. But
they can make their own repo for now, and then we can pull it in later on.
All right, I'll advise them of that.
They can make their own repo where? Anywhere in GitHub? Yeah.
They can clone it and start doing what they need to. So there's several things that are eCord has the optical piece, which we're not talking about. We're trying to separate that out. It has the
I'm sorry, you are trying to separate that out, or you are not?
We are. Or I'm sorry, Guru is, because of what the partners want, trying to keep that not bundled. I'm sorry, the disaggregated ROADM we're trying to keep unbundled from eCord. That eCord does not depend on that. On top of that, there is the on-demand L2 network that adheres to the MEF Pronto interface. That is an ONOS app. I didn't realize until fairly recently that it's primarily Huawei that's been working on that implementation. Now, if there's a second implementation, it's possible that I don't know about. Nokia then is taking the other half of or third of the problem and working on the integration into CORD of that ONOS app. But maybe we should wait for Mark on this then.
I find all of this very fishy because as far as I understand, what Huawei has been doing is trying to see how OFDPA and white boxes can be used to provide the MEF services. And there is one guy who works out of Dallas who's been doing that. Okay, there's his name. He has a Greek name. I forget it.
That's him. That's the guy.
Right. So he's the only person who's working on trying to see how white boxes and OFDPA can be used to provide this service. I was not aware that there was anybody else trying to integrate what he is doing with XOS. And
so I don't find that fishy because I've known about that for some time. So I understand everyone doesn't know everything that's going on. What I'm concerned about is, are there more than one? I mean, this is why we need a gate here, is that we want to make sure that if there is an effort that they coordinate before they come into CORD in a way that doesn't pollute CORD with.
Right, but if no, I'm sure Nokia has equipment, Alcatel-Lucent has equipment that will provide MEF services. So if they are just trying to stick the orchestration of their equipment, proprietary equipment,
No.
with XOS.
I don't know of anything like that. No, my understanding is that they were working with the rest of the eCore team. Every time I'm on the few calls I attend, it's the whole lot of them, and I have never heard of there being separate Nokia.
Yeah, I think they are pretty much working in close collaboration with Mark, and it is for our CORD and our stuff, and they may have this work on their own version of it, but their work is sort of our version of CORD. So I don't think your concern may be.
Okay.
So Guru, do you know of any other? My understanding has been that that the Huawei implementation is the eCord implementation of the MEF interface.
Right. I think that is what I think Huawei has been implementing. As we know, how far they are going to push that in the short term, we don't know, given their decision not to be a CORD partner. So I would take whatever they have done and bring it in, but not expect in the short term for them to do a lot more than that.
So when is Mark going to get back?
Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Let me check. Thursday. Yeah.
This Thursday? Okay.
I'm fine holding off until we can coordinate this with Mark, just to make sure that everything is lined up. All right, finally, sprint planning. I sent around some epics. Those were my reduction of what we had in the roadmap into something a little less vague and a little bit more focused and written in more epic story style on what we were trying to accomplish. Tried to make them a little bit less open-ended. They are now in JIRA CORD tickets 301 through 307. I did not add an epic for improving the CORD pod build automation because we already had one, and I assume we can just keep using that. If anyone objects to that, let me know. I did not create one around a test plan because there was already a creamy vegetable test epic, although it is entirely filled with Flavio's test stories, and so it didn't strike me as a general test plan, but at least it was a starting point. I also did not enter any epics around the trellis end of things because I had 3 somewhat narrow epics that had been called out, but I wanted to make sure that that was aligned with what the folks working in that space wanted to see happen. Is there one big epic? Are there 3 small epics? That is one of the questions to answer. So we can talk about those specifically, but I wanted to jump ahead just a little bit. I'd like to get sprint planning restarted ASAP. I'd like to actually use the sprint at 11 o'clock to just bring everyone up to speed, and then maybe have a sprint planning session tomorrow. But I wanted to throw that out and just get a general feedback on how people feel about that.
I think before we jump into sprint planning, we should decide 2 things. 1, the release cadence, and 2, at least what is our target for the next sprint, or next sprint, or next release.
Next release, right? Next 3 to 6 months.
Next release.
All right, so let me talk about the stories that I entered and why they're there and why I think they meet the criteria of things we need to work on sooner rather than later, or there happens to be a parallel group of people that aren't going to be doing anything else for us anyway, and so getting them working there is fine. Just 1 second. I need to find, there they are. Okay, 301, decoupling OpenStack. This is entirely about removing the dependency on OpenStack so that we can build a light and write CORD. Arguably, this does not need to be in the next release, but it is, by all accounts, one of the highest priority items that people are after. Let me just run through the list and we can come back and talk about priorities. Number 2 is service interconnection, which is, I've circulated a draft note about the design. This is mostly about enhancements to VTN. I consider these important for the other objective, which is to bring eCORD and mCORD into the fold. eCORD in particular, I think, is going to require this, and we are just way too hardwired into some RCORD specifics in the current version. Modeling support is less high priority, but this is largely about what's going on with Yang. We have Cornova working with us under contract to build out a prototype Yang replacement or augmentation of what's in XOS now. That will kind of go on in parallel, so I don't think it will gate too much else. I would like to get Matteo involved in it, though, just because it's at the user interface end of things. Configuration management is kind of already underway, and this sort of for completeness sake that we clean up and are consistent with everything is configured from. Kind of a bonus on top of that is to the
Larry,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. But we have read the epics. We have read the email that you have sent. So, I mean, I'm sure you have good motivations behind each of these epics. The real question that Ali and I are trying to ask you is, do you intend to create stories for these epics and everybody just kind of works on stories and 3 months later, whatever we have, we push it out? Or do you want to have a high-level goal for what is the next release and the time that we have to the next release, and then work towards that goal? Because I can guarantee you that if we create stories for these many epics and then with our current resources we start working on those stories, then 3 months later we're going to be at a point where none of these epics will be at a decent place where we can actually just put it together and push it out and say we met some kind of goal.
Okay, all right, I get your point. So I think the objectives for the next release are that we have cleaned up the automation of the build, and I think that includes configuration management, that we don't have 16 different places to go to set, to modify configuration, that is consolidated and clean. Number 2 is that we have included eCORD in the release with a service graph that we can put the eCORD stamp on, and objective 3 is that we've done the same thing with mCORD. Not necessarily that it's all open source, that's an orthogonal issue, but that we have a variant of all 3 boards in the next release.
Okay, so if those are the high-level goals, then there's probably like 1 or 2 of the epics that you have listed over here that actually falls under those goals. For example, OpenConfig, don't care, right? I mean, it's not something that will actually, okay, in the long term, yes, maybe, but for the next release, maybe not, right? Test plan at the same place, but for example, if you look at performance, that's a lot of work in itself, right? And it doesn't help us towards the goals that you just mentioned. Dual homing, yes, it improves the platform, but doesn't help us towards integrating eCORD and mCORD, for example, or automating the build process. So all of these things, right? I mean, okay, there are some epics that fall and some epics that clearly don't help us achieve that goal. It's extra new features, right? Which,
Right, so let me push back. I completely get that, and this is exactly the right discussion. I believe that I would put modeling support in that category if not essential. let me, that list maybe is easier to do first. So modeling support is, I'm making a note, is down. Controller HAN scale, I believe, is probably not an essential requirement. It's good, but not absolutely essential. So I've got performance, dual homing, modeling support, controller. I think I've hit all of them on the list here. Well, okay, so decouple OpenStack, I'm going to come back to because that one's kind of got another aspect to it. Service interconnection, I think, is on the up list along with, because it's going to be critical to generalize the way VTN works to bring in eCORD and mCORD. I think, like I said, I think there's too much RCORD hardwired. Now, that's a broad label, and it could go off in a dozen different directions, but I agree that we would need to keep it focused on what do we need to bring mCORD and RCORD on. Same with...
This is a good conversation, but this kind of should be put into sprint planning. Can we talk about her release cadence? What do we agree upon on how frequently do we release? Do we align ourselves with ONOS? Do we not align ourselves with ONOS?
Can we come back to cadence in a minute? I think there is a way to take the set of epics that I have and put them into top of list, bottom of list. But I would augment that by saying that even if they're at the top of the list, there will be narrower interpretations of those that stay focused. So let me take configuration management. OpenConfig is something that might help us, but I do not consider OpenConfig an absolute essential thing. I just want to make sure that all of our configuration management in whatever shape it takes is cleaned up. And there are no, oh, I forgot, you got to go touch that hidden config file somewhere. Service integration, like I said, I think is required because I think it's critical for the mCORD, eCORD generalization. Stacking XOS is at some level required because it is about, eCORD uses it, and it's just hacked it together so far.
I don't even understand why we need to stack XOSs. I thought we needed to stack ONOS.
Well, we need to stack XOSs. That's the model that eCORD has for managing an XOS. Well, I'm sorry. Each site is a standalone cord, which implies it has its own XOS. And the backbone metro area network is its own domain with its own controller controlling ONOS on the backbone. But to create an end-to-end thing, you have to touch each of the individual site cords and the backbone cord. And that means XOS is likely the one touching, but you're right that it could require some ONOS interaction as well. So that one could be generalized to include ONOS as well.
So I have a suggestion. I think all of the community is going to want to know what the plan is for the release, so you might consider having a release planning discussion. You can come in preloaded with what you think should be in the release, that's fine, but I think there ought to be a specific meeting that sets out, this is what we want to do in the next release, give the community a chance to review all of it and understand the stories. And once that is kind of locked in place, then you should probably start your sprint planning for this local team. And then, and it's okay to have extra epics, right? Because you're hoping that other people in the community are going to jump in and do some of that work. So you can show kind of a roadmap at that release meeting.
I agree. I think that is something we should learn from our ONOS experience. That is, it is important early on to share the roadmap with the community, engage the community, so that people can raise their hands and say, I want to participate, I want to contribute. Both, I mean, they can provide input, but more importantly, if the community knows the roadmap, then they are able to raise their hand and say, I want to help, I want to participate, and so on. And maybe this may be a little premature, but as we are thinking about the idea of brigade, should CORD adopt that earlier rather than wait until it is also in a similar situation like ONOS? But that may be an offline conversation.
I think there's an early stage release planning and a later stage. There's early stage, what do we hope to get done by the next release, and then there's later stage, it's in, it's out. So we can do both. I am, however, we have an engineering team that hasn't had a sprint planned in some time, and I believe there's a fair amount of drift going on, and then it would be helpful to get back into the cadence of having, 3-week sprints. Are the epics that I'm proposing 100% aligned with where we'll end up in the next release? Not necessarily, but I think it is an improvement over drifting the way we are now. That was my motivation for putting this together. I'm happy to have a release planning session and get broader feedback.
I think we should really do it. We just announce the project, and if our first release is planned internally, it reinforces the message that ON.Lab likes to do everything closed. So even though you understand your priorities, and I agree that if you are drifting, we should bring that structure. But it is really important that the first release we plan after the summit is community has an input into it, and it appears, or it is as if we are done it in open. Community has an opportunity to participate and contribute.
I'm complete. Go ahead.
I was just going to reiterate what Guru said. If there's any big decision, like what the release cadence should be or what's going to be in the next release, yeah, throw it up on the blog, ask the question, make the gesture that, you're bringing, the community in for the decision instead of just dropping it on them. I mean, that will increase the sense of ownership and decrease the sense of, as Guru said,
this perception that exists about ON.Lab.
So I am happy to have a release planning meeting and get feedback from everyone. Nothing I have said is counter to that.
Of course, yeah.
But we also have an engineering team that needs some guidance as to what to do tomorrow, and I think we should also be providing that.
Agreed. So I think both things are important. One thing maybe should be added to the agenda is when would we do that release planning with the community, and it should be sooner rather than later.
Well, can we do it yet this month?
Oh yeah, I would think we should do it this month.
Well, then we could. I don't know. Sometime in the next 2 weeks would be fine.
it also doesn't necessarily need to be a meeting. I mean, meetings are difficult for time reasons and others. I mean, you could try the blog mailing list discussion too to see if that really fosters the conversation. I mean, if scheduling is a hurdle, don't delay.
Well, yeah. So I'm happy to send out a message right after this on the Debel mailing list, saying that we, it's not too now we need to come back to Ali's question of what our cadence is, but whatever we figure out for the answer to that we need to start planning so we know how to where our priorities are. So what do we? So I can easily do that, and I can throw out some general ideas. That of course we want to make the release more stable and all of that, and we want to make it more inclusive. I mean, those are pretty broad objectives. What cadence should we talk about?
Also, not to be disruptive, but we're at the top of the hour, and some of us have other meetings to get to.
Well, we could also discuss what cadence we want.
Yeah. Yeah, online you're saying
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good. Let's get everything started online, and yeah, maybe we don't have to have a big meeting.
Okay. Should we drop off this call and join the stand-up call?
Yep. Let's do that. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.